This week's children message comes from the Jesus Storybook Bible, in the chapter, The Man Who Didn't Have Any Friends, None. The story of Zacchaeus from Luke 19. There was once a man who didn't have any friends, none. Do you have any friends? Well, of course you do, but not Zacchaeus. Poor Zacchaeus didn't have any. You're probably wondering why. Do you think it was because maybe he was so short? No, that's not a reason not to like somebody. Well, maybe it was because he had a name that was hard to say. No, that's not a very good reason to not have friends either. Even though he was short and he did have a funny name, that wasn't it. No, people didn't like Zacchaeus because he stole their money. You see, Zacchaeus was a tax collector. Taxes were what people had to pay the king. But Zacchaeus took more than he was supposed to, and he kept the extra money for himself, and in doing so, he made himself quite rich. Everybody knew what he was up to, and it made them really cross and grumpy. They didn't like Zacchaeus one bit. So they made sure he knew it by doing things like avoiding him, walking on the opposite side of the street, pretending not to see him, and whispering things like, "There's that nobody who thinks he's somebody," but they'd whisper it loud enough so he could hear them. Anyway, one day, a huge crowd gathered by the road. Jesus was coming to their town, and everybody wanted to see him. Zacchaeus wanted to see Jesus too, but everybody was too tall. He tried jumping up and down, but that didn't work. He couldn't see a thing. Luckily, Zacchaeus had an idea. "I'll climb that sycamore tree," he said, and so he did. He was actually pretty good at climbing trees for a man who was so unusually short he had to take a flying leap just to get into his chair in the morning. From the tree, Zacchaeus had the perfect view, all the way down the road. Another minute, and suddenly Jesus was at the tree. He stopped, and he looked up. Zacchaeus saw Jesus, and Jesus saw Zacchaeus. "Zacchaeus," Jesus said, "I'm coming over to your house." Zacchaeus almost fell out of the tree. Come over to his house? No one ever wanted to come anywhere near his house, let alone inside it. The people saw this, and needless to say, it made them even more cross and grumpy than usual. They mumbled and murmured and muttered, "Why is Jesus being kind to that big sinner? Doesn't Jesus know about him?" Well, Zacchaeus scrambled down and took Jesus to his house. He was in a really big hurry. He didn't want Jesus to change his mind. Perhaps Jesus hadn't heard about him. Perhaps he didn't know how he'd been stealing and how nobody liked him and how he didn't have any friends. But Jesus knew. He knew all about Zacchaeus. He knew about the stealing. He knew about everything. But he still loved him. Zacchaeus was ashamed. "Lord," he said, turning pale, "I know that what I've done is wrong, but I want to do the right thing. I'll give the money back to everybody that I took, 4 times what I stole." And that's what he did. Jesus smiled and he said to him, "Friend, today God has rescued you." Jesus loved Zacchaeus when nobody else did. He was Zacchaeus' friend, even when no one else was, because Jesus was showing people what God's love was like, his wonderful, never stopping, never giving up, unbreaking, always and forever love.